You're sitting at your family's Thanksgiving table, and your mum asks the one question that makes your blood boil every single year. But this time you're ready with an answer that's about to blow everyone's mind. What happened next at this dinner table will leave you absolutely speechless. So there I was, back at Mum's house for another picture-perfect Thanksgiving. You know the drill: fancy china, flickering candles, everything looking like it belongs in a magazine. But here's the thing about my family gatherings. They're basically a one-man show starring my golden boy brother. Let me paint you the scene. Brad's sitting there like he owns the place, leaning back in his chair with that smug confidence that just screams, "I'm better than you." And my mum. Oh, she's his biggest fan. Every story, every conversation, somehow it all comes back to how amazing Brad is. Meanwhile, I'm just there. The quiet sister who helps with dishes and gets polite nods when I speak. But this year was different. This year, I was done playing the supporting role in someone else's success story. So dinner starts the usual way. Everyone's filling their plates, making small talk about the weather and work. Then, right on schedule, Mum lifts her wineglass like she's about to make some grand announcement. And here it comes. "So," she says, practically glowing with pride, "Brad just closed on the most incredible house. 4 bedrooms, gorgeous kitchen. The yard is absolutely to die for. It's such a smart investment." The whole table erupts in the predictable chorus of "Oh, how wonderful" and "That's amazing." Brad just sits there with this modest little smile, like he's embarrassed by all the attention, but secretly loving every second of it. And then Mum turns to me. I see it coming from a mile away. That tilted head, that overly sweet voice dripping with fake concern. "Sweetheart," she says, "when are you finally going to settle down?" Now, I've heard this question 1,000 times. Different words, same message. When are you going to get married? When are you buying a house? When are you going to have something real to show for your life? Because apparently, if you're not following the exact same path as the golden child, you're somehow failing. For years. Years. I played along. I'd smile, give some vague answer about figuring things out, or someday soon. I'd let it slide because making a scene would just prove their point, right? That I was the dramatic one, the difficult one. But sitting there, looking at my mum's expectant face and my brother's smug expression, something inside me just clicked. I realized I was done apologizing for living my life differently, done pretending their approval mattered. So I did something I'd never done before. I let the silence stretch, just sat there, calm as anything, and let them all marinate in the awkwardness. Mum's question hanging in the air like a challenge. I reached for my wineglass, took a slow, deliberate sip. And then I looked my mother straight in the eye and smiled. Not the polite, people-pleasing smile she was used to, the kind of smile that says, "Buckle up because you're about to learn something." "Oh," I said, voice steady and clear. "I already did." You could have heard a pin drop. Mom just blinked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Did what?" she asked. "Settle down," I replied, still smiling. "I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me." The fork literally slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. Nobody spoke. Not my aunt, not my cousin, not even Brad. They all just stared at me like I'd announced I was from Mars. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started. Mum cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "So where is this house of yours?" she asked, her voice all careful and measured now. "Not far," I said casually, reaching for the bread. "Maybe 20 minutes, depending on traffic." Now everyone's leaning in. Suddenly they're all very interested in my life. Funny how that works, isn't it? Brad tries to jump in with his fake casual voice. 20 minutes, huh? What kind of place is it?" I took my time buttering my roll. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Then, like I was commenting on the weather, I said, "Just over 4,000 square feet." The reaction was immediate. My cousin let out this little whistle. My aunt's eyes went wide. Mum's hand tensed around her fork. And Brad. Brad leaned back like he'd been slapped. But here's what really got to them. I didn't say it like it was impressive. I said it like it was just normal, like it was no big deal. And that, more than the number itself, is what really shook them. Mum tried to recover, forcing this tight smile. Well, that sounds sizable. Don't you think that's a bit much for someone on their own? There it was, the subtle dig. The attempt to make my success seem like a mistake somehow, like if it wasn't shared on their terms, it didn't really count. I just nodded slowly. Maybe, I said, but I paid in full, so it's not exactly a burden. Her face twitched. Brad's grip tightened on his wineglass. And just like that, the story they'd all been telling themselves about me started crumbling. How long have you had it? Mum asked, and I could hear something new in her voice, something brittle. Almost a year, I replied. A full year, and they had no idea. No housewarming party, no photos, no social media posts. I'd built this entire life, and they'd missed it completely because they never thought to ask. Mum looked wounded. Why didn't you tell us? I tilted my head like I was thinking it over. I guess it just never came up. Brad couldn't take it anymore. He leaned forward, trying to regain some control. Come on, Natalie. A house is a pretty big deal. Kind of weird to keep it a secret, don't you think? Not really, I said, meeting his gaze. It's not like anyone ever asked. And that's when I decided to go for the kill shot. What kind of place did you buy? Brad asked, clearly trying to steer the conversation back to familiar territory. I swirled my wine, took another sip, and looked directly at him. Oh, I said, like it had just occurred to me. It's bigger than yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Brad's smirk completely vanished. His jaw clenched. For the first time in his life, he was on the defensive at this table. My aunt, bless her heart, leaned in. How big are we talking? I let them squirm for a moment longer. Then, lightly, almost casually, I said, just over 4,000 square feet. The gasp from my aunt was priceless. Mum's breath caught. And Brad. Brad said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Mum tried to throw him a lifeline. Well, Brad's home is lovely too. It's in such a nice neighborhood, such a smart investment. Brad straightened up, grateful for the assist. Yeah, real estate's all about timing. I got a great deal. But my aunt, curious as always, asked the question that changed everything. Wait, you didn't pay for it in full. The question hit like a bomb. Brad paused just for a split second, but it was enough. Well, no, he admitted. Most people don't, right? That's not really how it works. I gave this soft little hum. That's fair, I said. Some of us just prefer not to owe anyone anything. Brad's jaw clenched. His knuckles went white around his glass. And I knew I'd hit a nerve. So I leaned back in my chair and asked the question that would end everything. How's your mortgage, Brad? He froze, completely froze. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. What? Mum said, looking between us. Did you tell her, Brad? I asked softly. That you're barely staying afloat? That you maxed out your credit cards just to make the down payment? That the bank owns most of what you claim is yours? The room went dead silent. Mum looked at Brad like she was seeing him for the first time. You're lying, he said, but his voice was flat, desperate. If I'm lying, I said, leaning forward, then show Mum your bank statements, your mortgage balance, your credit score. He didn't move, didn't speak, and that was all the proof anyone needed. Brad, Mum whispered, tell me she's wrong. He laughed, but it was hollow, broken. She's just trying to stir things up. If I'm wrong, I said calmly, then prove it. No yelling, no accusations, just calm, measured words. And it destroyed him more than shouting ever could. Finally, in a voice so small it was barely audible, he said, 300. 300,000, Mom breathed. And just like that, the Golden Boy's crown came tumbling down. The son she'd paraded around like a trophy, the success story she'd built her identity around, was drowning in debt. But I wasn't done. I looked at Mum and said, "You never asked about my career, my life, my choices. You assumed if I wasn't like Brad, I was failing. But I didn't fail. I just stopped reporting to a system that never included me." Brad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm done," he muttered. "I don't need to sit here and be judged." "Funny," I said, folding my napkin. "That's what I've been doing for years." He didn't answer. He just walked away. The sound of the front door slamming behind him was the loudest thing in the house. And in that moment, everything changed. Not just for that night, but forever. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to twist the knife. The truth had done all the work for me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who needed explaining. It was her. "You always assumed I was behind," I said quietly. "You never asked where I was actually going." Mum looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not regret, but recognition. Maybe for the first time she wasn't seeing me through the lens of comparison. Maybe now she was seeing the woman who'd quietly accomplished what none of them thought she could. I stood up slowly, gathered my things, and headed for the door. No drama, no grand exit speech, just the quiet dignity of someone who'd finally stopped seeking approval from people who'd never bothered to see her. "Next time you want to know about my life," I said, my voice steady and clear, "maybe try actually listening." And with that, I walked out into the cold evening air. Not angry, not bitter, just free from the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their narrow definition of success. Here's what I learned that night. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to people who never bothered to understand you in the first place. Sometimes you don't need to prove anything, you just need to stop caring about the opinions of people who never really saw you anyway. The truth is, family doesn't always mean unconditional support. Sometimes it means conditional love, based on how well you fit their narrative. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is write your own story. So if you're sitting at your own metaphorical Thanksgiving table, surrounded by people who make you feel small, remember this. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living your life on your own terms. Your success doesn't need their validation. Your happiness doesn't require their approval. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stand up, walk out, and build something so beautiful that their opinions become irrelevant. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. And if you've got your own family drama stories, drop them in the comments below. Trust me, we've all got them. And hey, subscribe if you want more real talk about navigating difficult family dynamics. Until next time, keep writing your own story.